Welcome. My name is Rennie Warner, and I just wanted to welcome those of you who are here with us, both on Zoom and in the audience. This is a community forum to discuss the housing production plan. For all those who are interested in, this is not a meeting of the Stockbridge Affordable Housing Trust. We do not have a quorum, and so we meet. This is not a public meeting of any committee of the town, but it is a town meeting, a community meeting for all of you who've come, which we are very grateful for, to discuss with us and hear the presentation about a housing production plan, which is a study of our town and its demographics, and a plan for how more affordable housing can we hope be added to our community. And I assume all of you who are here care about that subject very much. So I'd like to introduce Jan Ackerman, who has taken the lead along with our other colleague, Michaela Donovan. And they are going to take over and tell us what we found.
Do you want to say a couple things before we dive in?
So first of all, I'd like to say thank you for coming. And because it's very important as we have been looking at the housing situation in Stockbridge. We've gone through a needs assessment, and for that, we had a community meeting and presented the needs assessment. And we had a workshop on that back in July. We had about 25 people come to that meeting and 7 more on Zoom. And then we also did a survey in August, and we got 77 responses to the survey. And so a number of the things that you're going to hear today have been influenced significantly by both of those meetings, both the survey and the workshop, because we've taken to heart the things that the community really voiced in terms of what they thought the priorities were in terms of strategies that we would use to address the housing needs in the town and so on. So that's really what I wanted to say. And then I'd like to turn it over to Michaela.
That's great. So I'm Michaela Donovan. I live full-time in Stockbridge with my family. And I just wanted to take a second to really thank Jan and Karen Sonnenberg, who are consultant, who've done the lion's share of this housing production plan and have really done a lot of work over the past year, really. So I just want to say that. And I think the other thing I just wanted to say is because this is a community forum and not an official meeting, like Randy said, we don't have our other members of the trust here. They wanted to be here, but because of the rules, only the 3 of us are here. And but you know, as you know, and we know, this is a really serious issue, not just in Stockbridge, but nationally, this is a serious issue. It's something that I'm grateful to work with this trust because they really are a very compassionate, conscientious, intelligent group of people who are listening to the community and really care because we are part of that community. And so I'm just grateful to work with such thoughtful colleagues on these issues. So shall we get into the actual plan itself? And then because there's such a small group, feel free, you can shift. We're going to show it up there so you don't have to awkwardly feel like you can't turn. But because it's such a small group here and on Zoom, like let's, jump in with questions as we go rather than wait till the end. If we have questions, we can chat about it. So let's, Michael, is it possible to, oh yeah, okay, you let me know.
Should be able to go on now.
There we go. Thank you so much. All right. How can okay, I just want to make sure I'm not. All right, great. So, as Jan mentioned, we've been working on this for quite a while. This just is a recap sort of the purpose and why we were doing this. This is the first town study this town has done, to my understanding. The town and select board really requested that we undertake this in a thoughtful and researched way. And so that's what we have done. Thank you, Michael. This study is really to look at the state of housing overall, not just affordable housing, but what is the situation with housing in Stockbridge, so that we can make informed decisions as a community about how we want to, what direction we want to go in when it comes to more housing for the community itself and to bring more people in. So obviously that's the purpose, understand the data, identify the needs and the strategies. And then the hope is we're creating a 5-year plan for the housing in the community. As Jan said, and just to reiterate, the process that we have done has been quite extensive for the short time that we've been a committee. We did that workshop in July. That was very useful. And there were a lot of thoughtful comments from that, also from the survey. And then anyone, obviously, as you all know, and you've been coming, are welcome to attend these affordable housing trust meetings that we have, and we have them they're available on Zoom as well. And then we're holding this community forum, likely will be more of these. And then we will be hopefully taking this plan to the planning board and the select board hearings that are scheduled for the next month or so. So we had that session in July was our needs assessment. We don't have to go into too much detail in that because we have done that, but I'm just going to highlight some of the things from that. That came out of that in the next 2 slides. So right now we have a total of 1,638 homes. 80% were built before 1980. About half of those, 811, are full-time resident homes. We already exceed the 10% state affordability requirement.
What does that mean?
So that means that the state will require each town to have 10% of the housing stock be considered affordable housing. And we actually do already exceed that with our residences at Heaton Court, Pinewoods, and Riverbrook. So that is where we stand right now, which is good. There are I don't know if are there any other towns in Berkshire County that meet that requirement at this point?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Lennox may soon.
Yes, they will.
Lennox has had an aggressive plan.
Right.
And I think they are going to be over it when they finish.
Right.
I'd just like to say that that a requirement for 10% is what we call capital A affordable housing. And that means that all of that housing that's classified under that nomenclature has federal or state subsidies. So that is the definition. It's not, what does it cost? It's do those 3 developments. And that's a picture of one of them, which is Heaton Court, which I think everybody knows. And it has 53 units for senior housing.
Mm-hmm. And is it fair to say that as a trust in general is called the Affordable Housing Trust, but we talk about all sorts of, we talk about workforce housing, we talk about things that are not necessarily falling under that
The capital A.
definition. Yeah.
I noticed Riverbrook is there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just a little surprised that that's.
Please come in,
Join
join us.
Yeah, it's because they do get subsidies from, that's why.
Please come sit in the front row,
Or anywhere.
anywhere you like, but
Oh, my goodness.
Somewhere you can turn your chair and see the screen.
I've got a comfy chair.
Yeah,
okay,
there you go.
by all means, anything you like. Good. Would you like to just quickly, we'll take a break and you introduce yourself to everyone?
Sorry, ask me again.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, Marie and Keith Crabtree.
Great. And do you live on Glendale?
No.
East Street.
East Street.
East Street.
East
right.
Street.
So we were just going over the start of this housing production plan. So you haven't missed much. We're on the first slide. So this is just information about the amount of homes that are here and what falls under affordable residences. And then from that needs assessment that we did, over throughout the year and over the summer. We've seen some trends. Obviously, we've shared some of these, but some people haven't seen them. So our resident population has declined. Our student population has declined. There's fewer residents in that 30 to 50 age range. The median age is 60 years. That's up from 41 years old in 2010, which is a huge jump. The decreases in the median household income. So for Stockbridge, it's actually the median household income is 46,500, well, in 2021. So there's been an increase in poverty. 21% of residents claim a disability. The housing growth has been slow. A lot of these are trends that we're seeing around the country, but we're definitely seeing them here as well. We're not immune to that. We have very low vacancy rates. Housing costs are no longer affordable for a lot of families and a lot of people. The gaps are bigger, and then more people and more families are high cost burdened. So 1 in 3 households spends more than 30% of income on housing, and 1 in 8 spends more than 50%. So these were the trends that we've taken away from the work that we've been doing specific to Stockbridge. So coming out of the needs assessment, we were asking what are our actual priority housing needs? And there's so many, there really are so many. It was hard for us to, it can be hard to decipher which ones take priority, but we did narrow it down and focus in on 3, and especially these first 2. Then we really have a need for both rental and home ownership units in the town. The need for resources to improve the housing stock. So 45% of our units predate World War II, and that, obviously can cause a lot of issues and can be very difficult for people to pay all the bills they need to pay and also maintain their homes and make sure that they are safe as well. So there's a huge need for that as well. And then obviously a need for greater handicapped accessibility and support services. 21% of our residents claim a disability. So we are aware of that as well. In our specific goals, state housing production plan requirements are that we're producing 0.5% of year-round housing units or 5 SHI units per year, which for us is subsidized housing inventory. Subsidized housing inventory units per year must be affordable to households with incomes at or below 80% AMI, area median income, or Part 40B rental development. And the housing production plan still addresses the housing needs of a wide range of incomes.
Do you want to tell them what the median income is here?
It's for a family of 2, the 80% of the affordable median, the area median income is about 62,000. So this would be having units that would be affordable for a family of 2 who's earning $62,000 a year.
Which is higher than the median household income.
It is,
for,
right.
Yes, it
Stockbridge.
is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But
Which is surprising, I think, for people.
we still feel, or at least I'll speak for myself, that I'm extremely puzzled about the 46, is it 46?
Something like that, yeah.
It's in the 40s, mid 40s.
Well, I think that for us as a trust, and for me, I'll speak for myself too. I think what's interesting about that is it shows the nuances of this whole situation. I mean, it shows that sometimes what people see of the town is they see this town that, is very vibrant and comes alive, especially in the summer with a lot of tourism and culture and wealth. There's a lot of wealth as well. And so I think that's what is easy to see right away. And then we sort of miss the fact that there are a lot of nuances to that there's a lot of people who lived here for a long time, been in their homes for a long time, but might have all their cash tied up in their home, or, there's a lot of, it's not black and white, as we know.
Yeah.
And it's definitely an issue that, that number really surprised us. But when you really think about it, I mean, I guess it's absolutely possible that is really very true for this community. And,
This data is really, it's only for year-round residents.
Right.
There's no,
yes, part-time residents are not included in that.
And the sort of extreme wealth in general
That's right.
is in the second home.
That's right. Yeah.
Community.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So, these are some of the strategies that we want to focus on. Well, I definitely think we have to, and Patty, I'll get to your question, in 1 second. Let me just read the rest of this and then we'll jump to you. To conduct ongoing community outreach and education, that's what a lot of these forums are for. And I think it's really important that we have an open and transparent dialogue with all of you, with all of our peers in the community to figure out how to solve this together. Capitalize the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and secure financial resources for this goal. For zoning strategies, which we heard a lot of actually as feedback in the summer meeting, we do feel it's important to adopt zoning for possible ADUs. We are not necessarily looking to make widespread zoning shifts and changes because that can undo a lot of things. That can cause a lot of questions and issues. Come on in,
Welcome, come in, please sit in the front row.
grab chairs or whatever you need to do. Yep. But we do feel the ADUs are very valuable.
Turn the chairs around.
Valuable. We'd like to identify modest opportunities for a wider range of choices in very specific areas of the community, and then promoting multifamily and multi-use development in or near downtown is also a goal that we think will help the town stay very vibrant and provide opportunities for people to live near where they possibly work, which would be really lovely. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Can I take Patty's question and then
Sure.
first and then
Nikki.
we'll jump to you. Patty, you want to jump in?
Yeah, it was just a tiny point. Just a minute ago when you guys were talking about the breakdown of like the part-time residents versus the full-time residents and where the wealth lies in the housing. It's actually a bit of a misunderstanding. There's like this idea that all the high-end houses all belong to part-time residents. There's extraordinary wealthy houses that belong to full-time residents. It was a breakdown that we did in reaction to the residential tax exemption. So it isn't really just the part-time residents that have the big fancy houses. It doesn't break down according to full-time, part-time. It's a tiny clarification.
That's
Misunderstood clarification.
Thank you, Patty. That's true. You're very right on that. So we don't want to necessarily generalize too much in this. So thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Patty, would you agree though that the word all is not appropriate, but if you would find greater wealth among our second homeowners than in general you would find in the full-time residents?
Well, I mean, the purpose of this particular initiative is to talk about housing stock. So, I mean, yes, of course, the part-time residents are wealthier, they have a higher median income and all that. But if you just break it down to housing stock, the breakdown between I'm gonna just keep calling them the fanciest houses because it's easier. There's plenty of fancy houses, and it's not quite 50% of the fanciest houses belong to full-time versus part-time, but it's so close that it's just kind of like one of those myths that I encounter a lot. So it wasn't a big deal. I just wanted to kind of clarify.
No,
Yes,
I think it makes a lot of sense, especially knowing, how everyone was responding to the RT and things like that. I think it is important to make that distinction. Thank you. Thank you, Patty. That's
Yep.
great.
Thank you, Patty.
I'm sorry, did Patty work on the plan?
No, Patty actually lives in my neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah, as Patty, you are part-time, correct?
Yes, because my house is part-time.
That's right. Your house is part-time. That's right. Yep.
So you're not a full-time resident either?
No.
Okay.
But actually Patty's great. Patty's very involved in communicating with the part-time residents and letting them know what's going on in town, which is great. Nikki, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, though it does seem like what a part-time house is a tent. But anyway, yes, I read what I could of your proposal. And it did seem like the language was a bit vague on the zoning. and what zoning changes would be allowed and how to get around certain zoning regulations. Wasn't really clear who would be deciding on the changes in zoning and when that would occur. And it also seemed like the wording was vague on the zoning for ADUs, indicating that there will be quite a lot of leeway. And I just wonder how that would change the character of the town or even small areas or neighborhoods. If all of a sudden people felt like putting up any kind of, well, you've seen what's happened like with the Airbnbs in New York, for instance. It seemed like a good idea, may seem a little different category, but actually that would benefit the people who wouldn't have to pay the high hotel bills, for instance. But yet it became a real mess when there was no real regulation of it. And now, as you probably know, it's not allowed at all. And so I was wondering, it's like sometimes things do seem like a good idea, but once they're put into motion, there are consequences, unintended consequences. And so it just seemed like a slippery slope to me.
Can I just address that? Oh,
Yeah.
There are a lot of communities have had experience with ADUs, and much larger communities have kind of over the years shifted permitting to become more and more towards special permits to buy right, becoming more progressive in order to encourage them. Even in larger communities, there are never waves, and they are specific requirements that they have to meet. And they're usually like no more than a handful a year. And most of the ADUs are in an existing structure. So you can't really tell whether there's an ADU in there or not. So, the general experience in towns has been that there's very little negative impact. But for the homeowner, it could be, who particularly homeowners are paying much too much for their housing. That added income can be very helpful. And for a small household or a single person looking for a rental, given the rental costs, that unit could be really valuable for either staying in town. So it does serve a number of purposes. And I think that whatever, in the process, the town, we have in there is that have developed some draft bylaws. They haven't been, gone through any kind of process at this point. But the planning board would be the entity you asked about who would be responsible, it would be the planning board, and then town meeting would have to approve it. So there are lots of opportunities for the public to weigh in on the specific requirements.
I also think we'd be waiting on the state vote, correct?
I think we should point out that
Yeah.
the state of, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts
Yeah.
has a proposed ADU law that will be across the state,
Allowing them.
allowing them. So it will not be a local decision if that happens. Everybody will have the right to have an ADU, and there's a prescription of how big it is and.
But I think local communities, there will be
Ken.
jurisdiction to adjust that depending upon the community. I think
Exactly.
what we're seeing is that that Moore Healy's administration is pushing this as a way to provide more housing
Quickly.
quickly and affordably for people.
And I will just say, in both the town workshop that we had in July and also in the survey, allowing ADUs was one of the top 3 or 4 things in terms of strategies that people participated in
liked.
that.
Yeah.
Thought we should be pursuing. So all of these things. But I think also your question was about all the zoning changes. I don't think we're envisioning a huge change in zoning in any of the things we're talking about in this plan.
Actually, when you bring in ADUs, isn't that sort of a backdoor way of changing zoning? Because if you have, let's say something is zoned for 2 acres, okay? And then you have an ADU or two small structures, doesn't that, by virtue of how you would actually do it, reduce the zoning to 1 acre or 3/4 of an acre or whatever, because you have more structures on the property? Doesn't that actually change in effect the zoning?
Marie's a member of the planning board. Would you like to comment on that?
Usually ADUs are connected to an apartment in a building. They're not usually extra structures on a lot. We have an ADU bylaw that's coming, well, an ADU, the selectmen have done the ADU, I guess, presentation mostly in our town. But it will be coming up before the town meeting and it will be all explained what the regulations are and you know, what the bylaws.
And also the limit of the ADU is 900 square feet.
Yeah.
So it's much smaller
Mhm.
than most,
It's not.
so it's not like the same thing as adding a whole
Yeah.
house.
Sometimes it can be
It's accessible to
yeah.
ADU.
And
So
sometimes it
far.
can be attached to the
Can be
house, or it can be over a
over a
garage
garage
or something like that. Yeah.
Or,
So it's never a separate unit?
No, it can be. It can be. I think all of these things are things that would have to go through a lot of commentary, whether it's with the planning board, the select board, the town meeting. These are all things that I think the hope is that a community comes together and agrees on what the options are for this.
But I really want to stress, though, that there is a statewide law that is being, it's under, it's in process and is expected to pass, I believe it's fair to say. Wouldn't
I
you?
think it probably will.
Yeah, it will.
We think it will pass. Now, what I don't know is whether the local communities can override it and say
Well,
no.
I don't know if they can override, but they might be able to make regulations in their town.
Yeah, to consider.
If the state says you need to allow ADUs, you can also make your laws in your town, I would guess. You know, to make it the way you want it in your town.
And I think one other aspect to think about in all of this is if one has an ADU, putting a restriction on that it's not a short-term rental. So it would be a longer-term rental.
Yeah.
Which
That
which
would
would
be-
really kind of avoid the Airbnb issue in a way.
It's gonna be a different issue.
Well, I didn't mean that they.
Well, yeah.
I just.
Yeah, I read the section on ADU. I do think it will increase density. I think there was some reference in the document to streets won't be impacted or something like that. And I have to apologize. It's a very dense document. Congratulations.
It's
Really,
It's intense.
complicated, substantive
Mhm.
document. At the same time, I have a, concern similar to Nikki's in the sense that you are increasing the density of a community when you allow ADUs, whether they are, detached or attached. And so as a planning document and a policy document, there's a reference in the document, I think it's table 4.41, that says adopt zoning for ADUs in year 2. I know the state is working on, on some work. And it says total number of units 2. So I don't know where the number 2 comes from. And Karen is saying she doesn't either. To me, it would be more, at least from a data viewpoint, to talk about worst case scenarios.
All I can say is that larger towns, 5 is big for them, like Lexington or, Bedford or, these larger towns, 5 is large for, so expect there's not going to be a wave. Because it takes a while for them to actually be integrated and created, for one thing. So 2 is a good guess.
Plus people would have to have the assets to
Exactly.
to build
Yeah.
an
And we were
ADU.
just talking
Yeah.
about the wealth of Stockbridge.
Yes.
So in my mind, just to throw out a number, two, first of all, where did it come from? And second of all, how realistic is it, considering that the town is saying that's something that's part of our housing plan that we actually want to encourage, based on my read of this document. So
Jackie, well, you
Concerns
wouldn't
about-
want the worst case scenario in the planning document, right? That wouldn't make any sense.
well,
So what would you suggest in terms of,
I don't
if you
know.
don't, if
I don't
Karen
know.
is
I
saying
don't
two
know.
per year is
Based on,
kind of middle of the road?
yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people here have even applied for it. I mean, one of my bigger issues, with the document is that there's no data associated with actual land use actions that the town has reviewed. So for example, how many people in the community have actually applied for an ADU, whether it's a great idea or not? I don't know. You have that data, I don't. So I just think that it's important to at
Not sure.
least provide some context for some of the policies associated with land use actions that the town has actually reviewed.
Well, actually, Marie, my understanding is that there is a section of zoning that deals tangentially detached structures. And that recently one came through the planning board, but it didn't go anywhere. So we're talking about very limited ability to permit ADUs for one thing. That's why it's being recommended. And the other thing is without the ability to permit, no one's going to apply for it because there's no there. So
Why it didn't progress?
what didn't progress?
You said there was.
Oh, somebody did, they decided, it wasn't with the permit, it was, I'm trying to remember the specifics. Yeah.
I don't remember one coming before us.
Now, someone had mentioned it to me that there was one that didn't actually happen.
I thought I read that as well.
Yeah.
I spoke with a lady when we did our workshop this summer, and she did put an ADU on her property, but
You can have like two-family houses, and you can have an apartment.
But that's not an ADU,
but
two
that's
family,
not-
yeah,
That's not up there.
yeah.
Just raising a concern.
Okay. Thank you.
but I think in general, based on what we know, it's a very small number right now. What you raise is that if this statewide law goes through, there really we won't have any control. It's happening, I think we all
Depends
think.
what the state, it depends how the state says it. If it says they can be allowed, but the town can regulate, that, that's a different thing than the state just making an overall
Right,
law.
that's right.
Have you seen any
It's already
drafts?
the same. I mean, often you can do your own regulating, even though the state says, yes, you need to have ADUs in the town.
I think
So,
that, I think
It
they'll
depends how
have to.
it comes across.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can
Right.
have ADUs in our state.
Well, they serve a very valuable purpose. I think what Jackie's saying is that, like all things in excess, they change character of the town. But I'm just wondering, have you seen any draft language? Has anybody here seen any draft language of what they're considering
In the state.
in the State House?
The state has had a ADU model bylaw. My sense was that they were going to basically say the town should zone to allow ADUs, but they're not going to specify, they have to be a such and such size, they have to be, they're to leave some of those decisions up to the locality.
Well, they would have to because each town is different, I mean, what is, the density of certain areas will require that they be a different size than they would if they were somewhere else, I would imagine. So hopefully they will allow for some individual adjustments.
That's a subject that is of interest.
Yeah.
Good.
But Jackie, I think you make a good point, which is like, how do we collect the data to really make sure the context is clear?
Well, and the planning board it knows who's come before it, and the building department, you have to have a building permit if you're gonna put one in, so the building records
Are there?
show.
Yep, so any other, Shelby has your hand up, Shelby? On Zoom?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on Patty Kaya's comments with just 2 points. One is that putting aside the wealthiest houses in town, I think it's undoubtedly true that the median income for people who can afford a second home is greater than the median income for our permanent residents. Also, one of the reasons that we're even having this discussion about people, aside from affordable housing, but just kind of general workforce housing, is that the prices of houses in town have been inflated because so many second homeowners over the last several years have been buying houses at such high prices that local people are being priced out. So I just wanted to get those comments in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Karen's gonna jot that down.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. No, go for it. Great. And so housing strategies in terms of going forward, we're looking to partner with developers on privately owned properties, make suitable public property available for affordable housing, and establish housing preservation initiatives. To dive back to the first one, I know a lot of people are here because we have a property that's come up off of Glendale Middle Road. This has been donated to us, and we're currently in the midst of an engineering study on this property to even see if it's even possible to build on that property. That's in progress. So we didn't specifically add that into this housing production plan because that is in progress and we do not know if it is a buildable area. So we didn't want to necessarily commit to that within this study, but it's important, I think, that we just say it out loud and be transparent about what that is and what's happening with that. And obviously, as we go through this spring and we do diligence on what's happening with that property, we will have meetings and make sure we have conversation with residents about what's happening there.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that point?
Yeah.
Table 1.1, summary of housing strategies. Number 3, development and preservation strategies. Partner with developers on privately owned properties, included donating property. And it identifies 13 units. Is that number include? And this is something that you have been raising.
Sure.
For some time, as in addition to my neighbors who are abutters. But the number 13, is that based, are we talking about the Morris property here? Is that number reflective of that? Where did the number come from? I understand there was a proposal from the 80s that actually had 12 or 13 units on that parcel, which was, I believe, denied by the town. Or I don't know if it came from Mr. Morris's analysis himself of what potentially could be built. I don't really know. But to say that we're waiting for the report, yet have a number here that's reflective of some property, I think has to be explained.
Well, what we have in there is we have a target over the next 5 years of identifying overall in Stockbridge, 25 units, which is the 0.5% a year of the full-time residence structures to be affordable housing. Whether we meet that or not, we don't know at this point because we don't have any concrete properties or concrete plans identified right now to do that. Obviously, as Michaela said, the Morris property is a potential in there. We don't know whether it could be built on. We don't know how many units it would make sense to build on there because we don't even know if it can be built on at this point. So the number comes from, we have to identify in this plan over the next 5 years, kind of what we are hoping to accomplish And that is only one property. There are other properties in town that we potentially could be looking at to do that if the Moore's property doesn't pan out. So
What,
I think
are
it's-
the other properties you're thinking of?
well, there's a Levon property that has a lot of issues around it in terms of infrastructure and so on that could be redeveloped to,
Which one is that? Sorry.
it's the school. that is-
Well,
Oh, the, on Route
camp.
7, you mean? The
Yeah.
camp, yeah.
The
the
camp.
camp. You know, and there may be other properties that come up over the next year or two that we don't know about at this point. And so we're not really saying there's a decision about this many units going on this property. We're way ahead. We're not there yet. You know, we're just at the point of we'd like to identify a plan and identify properties where we could develop that over the next 5 years. And that would be our objective. to
Isn't
do
that what
this.
So are these,
you
these
allocated?
I-
So let's say that.
you have, are they for the traditional affordable housing as in Heaton Court? Or is it,
So it's not.
because
Yeah.
I think in your plan, you said
Yes.
it was like a small A, like generally affordable, but not, because the Heaton
Yeah.
Court, it comes under all the jurisdictions. of the
Subsidies.
master
Yeah, it's
law.
capital.
So is it like that, or are you thinking of something else?
Well, it's in the plan as a capital A,
Forgive me, I was talking to Karen. So
the affordable housing units, 25.
the
as-
25,
With all the same restrictions as in Heaton Court, or are you thinking? of
Well,
something?
it may be that, because we are also looking at whether it would be rental, which is what Heaton Court is, or home ownership, which could be another whole scenario. Because there was a lot of feedback that came back from the workshop and from the survey saying that home ownership was a significant desirable thing for a lot of the people who were interested in having capital A affordable housing as well. So, you know, it might be not like Heaton Court in terms of it could be home ownership.
But I mean, in terms of who gets to be there and whether it's supervised by the state or that kind of thing. Because I know my husband is on the board of the housing authority, so we know about all the regulations that
Mhm.
go on and who can live there and who, which seems kind of restrictive when you're just talking about small A affordable housing.
we're also thinking that some of the most successful projects have some portion of capital A, some portion of small a, some market.
Right.
And we think that if, at least I'll speak for myself, that the most successful ones aren't all of one type. And that some of the most successful ones in the country have brought together a range of people. And I think that we certainly want to look at that.
And in particular, because one of the other things that came through as a housing need in the community was for young families and for, which would not necessarily be capital A affordable. They may well be just housing prices that are reasonable that a young couple could buy a house and do that. So that may be part of what would be in a development as well, because that came through loud and
Right.
clear that it was a priority for our town.
Right, because the pricing of, first-time homebuyers is really what's out of reach as well. For a
I
lot
don't
of
know if we took the survey, is it too late to take it? I think we might have missed it. Is it?
No, well, I took it.
Oh, you did? Maybe I-
I think you may have taken it as well.
Okay.
Your vote was overtaken. But certainly, the three projects that we have in Stockbridge are all have government subsidies in them. They're, Heaton Court is senior oriented, Pine Woods is family. And if you might be interested that the largest concentration of children or families with children in our town is in Pine Woods. To give you some indication of exactly that problem of that our families can't afford to come here unless they meet these, very severe income requirements. So if we can figure out a way to do for sale housing that is affordable, not capital A affordable, but it's affordable for families. I think that will be one of our major contributions to the community.
And we'll
It's
show
not
you
easy
some
to do.
models of some projects that do have, several different income tiers. In the
So do we want
presentation.
to jump to those?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we're going to show you some models. Can we all keep in mind as we look at these, that these are for very specific communities. This is what certain communities decided to do that fit the aesthetic of their communities. None of this is what we're saying that we would do here. These are just, we want to make sure we just see what other communities have done and how they've been trying to solve these problems. So it's just to give you ideas.
And get some feedback from.
Get some thoughts, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we wanted to show different housing types.
Right.
Wanted to show different levels of density. Most of the projects we're showing have been, award-winning ones. And they have been prized by the communities, but we are not suggesting this is what you do. But it gives you an idea of density and types and what you think might actually work in Stockbridge. So we just provided a couple of slides on ADUs. And that's the drawing on the right, on the left, shows that ADUs can be part of an existing dwelling, and they usually are. They're within the existing structure, and they're subordinate to the principal dwelling, and typically the owner can live in the ADU or the principal dwelling. They can also be attached to the existing primary dwelling, and in some cases, they can be detached. And this particular ADU shows a detached dwelling. You want to go to the next slide? And these are just another couple of examples. I mean, of the detached unit, the one on the right being a unit that's built above a garage. ADUs can be included in carriage houses and barns and other outbuildings, but just to give you an idea, if we showed you an ADU in an existing structure, it would just look like a regular house. I mean, that basically, so.
Sorry, can we go back to that previous slide for 1 second?
Sure.
I just had a question. Reading the document, I thought you had to provide a parking space for the primary home as well as the ADU. Is that correct?
It depends on
Nodding her head over.
Right, it's just that these slides,
Yeah.
this doesn't represent the parking,
There
No, it doesn't represent parking.
but you have to, right?
But you do.
You're
Yeah.
required.
Yeah, some bylines don't.
So it depends, I think, yeah,
Depends on the bylaw and
It depends on the town.
Yeah, town.
yeah.
But this town does.
Yeah,
There's no ADU bylaw per se right now, so, I mean, besides
In
that.
a house, you have to have enough parking spaces.
Is that true in the zoning downtown?
I'm sorry,
Is that true of the zoning downtown?
the living space
But I mean, about parking.
downtown, that's different than,
But different zoning.
That's a different zoning area, and so,
yeah, downtown parking is different than,
so I think the answer to the question, it's not just the town, it's the particular zones.
their residential parking, but for everybody that lives in a dwelling, there has to be a parking spot.
Question is, though, if you add the ADU, some bylaws say that you need an extra off-site parking spot. Some
Right.
don't really address it. So it's up to the particular bylaw and what's decided as the terms and conditions of the permitting.
Isn't there a proposed bylaw though associated with this for the town?
There is a draft bylaw. We're not saying, we just included the summary of what had been an early draft.
Right, but the draft facilitates 2 parking spaces or requires 2 parking spaces if you have an accessory dwelling unit.
I think
I don't
the
think,
existing draft, it has one off-street parking space.
only one for 2 units.
It adds one space. So if the existing parking requirement is one, then you haven't added one. I think that's just the preliminary,
Draft.
just a draft.
I understand.
I also would imagine that draft is going to be revisited.
Oh,
once the
yeah.
State thing comes through. So that's probably why.
I want to caution someone parking down street. You can't park on the streets during the winter time down, but you can't say they park their car in front of them.
That has to be on.
Has to be off street.
Off streets.
Parking must be on.
Patty, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so this actually speaks, there's all this talk of the ADU specifics language that's in the document actually speaks to something that I had a question about that's more of an overarching question. And that's about the push-pull between this document, once it's adopted by the town, and actual zoning that will come before the planning board and a select board. Because, like, for example, I found that the ADU language to be very prescriptive. And I was kind of surprised that it was in this document because that's such a specific thing to happen down the line. And the language that was included was language that was proposed last year. It was met with public opposition. It was voted by the planning board to go back to the drawing board. And it was voted down 2-1 by the select board to go back to the drawing board and reword it. And yet it somehow ended up in this document. So that's where I'm curious. I don't really need to know about the micro level. I personally think it might be a little prescriptive to be including in this document, but I am very interested in knowing the question about the macro level of what is the push and pull between this document once it's adopted, and will it have a sort of undue weight? So someone could come back with that same ADU language and say, well, we shot it down last year because it was not the right language, but it's in the housing production plan. Like, will it have more weight now? Bad draft bylaw language than it did last year?
You know what? I got to say, I mean, maybe other people want to kind of chime in, that the language of that draft bylaw is really similar, if not almost exactly, what the bylaws that are being adopted in a whole range of communities, going to kind of the by right status and whatever. All of the recommendations in the housing production plan will need to go through normal regulatory channels. So, there will be a real process, as you mentioned before, of re-looking at an AD bylaws, looking at the terms and conditions, particularly after the state kind of, the bond bill passes, the act passes. So this is like preliminary, and we included it to give people some idea of what kinds of conditions are typically now being prescribed in communities.
But I think it's also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if the state passes it, the planning board is the one that would take on kind of reviewing
Yes.
what
The details of that.
the details are of any ADU proposal that would come forward. Right?
Yeah, it depends what the regulations are.
Right, yeah.
Who, and what the permitting board in a given town is, whether it's a select board or the.
Yep, exactly.
So.
All right, let's go on to
Okay.
the Jenny Way. This project is what we often call like a pocket neighborhood. Low density, a cluster of small bungalows. In many cases, in other communities, they're called cottages. In Stockbridge, that's probably not the right term for them. And they're clustered around a green space. You can
These are
see
cottages for the 21st century.
Yes. Yes. So it's kind of low density development. This is home ownership, 9 bungalows, income tiers, 80% income tier, 100% income tier, 120%, and 140% of area median income. In this particular development, it was 3.5 acres per unit, and was developed by the Island Housing Trust and the South Mountain Company. It did receive numbers of awards, and it was included in an existing neighborhood in Edgartown. So it's not out in the woods. It's actually in an existing neighborhood, kind of, they call infill missing middle, kind of is the term that we often use in planning about this type of development. Look at in this slide, we have an aerial view of it as well as the site plan, which shows how it's kind of nestled in an existing community.
Do you know what the average sales price is on these houses?
Well, this was a few years ago, so it would be, but once they ranged
Yeah,
based on it's actually indexed to the income limit.
I see.
So there was a range, and it is changed, it's changed over time, but certainly little a and capital A inserted into this particular project.
Who does the means testing? Is there an organization?
Yes, yes, the Island Housing Trust, who's developed it, also, did the application process and the determining of eligibility and a lottery.
And then they continue to do it over the years as the houses get.
When our home ownership, there's no kind of recalculation or re-eligibility. But they do monitor that the affordability requirements remain. So the people have to occupy the units as their principal residence. And if they're going to refinance or resell, they go through a very, a specific protocol to maintain the long-term affordability at that particular income level.
For sale properties are very, very challenging because trying to maintain a fair way for the people who buy and should be able to have appreciation and some, because they pay taxes, they maintain the property, they take care of it, they improve it. And so they should be able to get some sort of return on their investment. But it's very tricky getting the formula right so that when the resale comes, it's fair to the community and the affordability remains in place.
So that the house presumably will stay at a low-ish level.
Well, yeah, and the resale prices are indexed to changes in area median income.
Right.
So what we've experienced in the last few years is that area median income has gone up a lot more than we expected, in some years 10% or so. But it stays affordability to those folks at that income level. So it's limited appreciation, but still, I'm seeing, people stay in the house for 7 years, getting $40,000. Not terrible.
But I'm just wondering who is going to be doing it, say, 10 years from the first time that it gets resold and then another 10
There's a monitoring agent that's assigned.
But in Stockbridge, would there be a monitoring?
There are regional entities that could serve as lottery agent and marketing and monitoring agents.
Well, for example, one of them, Berkshire Housing, is very, very skilled at monitoring. And Berkshire Housing is a very large, it's our largest county affordable housing developer, and they own, several thousand units, but it
Is
just.
that nonprofit?
Yes, yeah. It was started by the banks some number of years ago. But anyway, I just mentioned that's one. There are others that can continue to monitor these things.
I noticed on that previous slide, they mentioned 3 houses per acre, right?
3.5 units per acre.
Right, 3.5 units per acre.
Mhm.
It's not taking into consideration water or septic and wells, won't fit on that.
This is just an example of what they did. Yeah.
But this is all the things that would have to be considered is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And end up just like over Pinewood, they have no place to store their lawnmower, no place to put any of their equipment. There's no storage sheds or any garages there either. So it's just a basic house.
Yeah.
So,
This is,
I'm just bringing up crazy problem, but those are the problems you're gonna have.
Right.
It's gonna
We're not locked into this design. We're just using it as an example of how others have kind of created
But these are
housing
good things to think
opportunities.
about is what are the
Absolutely.
needs here? You
Yeah.
know, what are the needs so that people can maintain something and also, you know, mow their lawns and do things and that things, you know, stay
Why don't we go to the
fitting the
next
town.
project? What? Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you for including photographs and visuals. I think, you know, we've been coming to the meetings and one of the things that was mentioned was that it's so great to see visuals because you can really relate to what's being proposed or from a policy viewpoint, what's being recommended here. I have a question about I think there is an existing clustered subdivision bylaw currently, which is limited to R2 and R4 districts. I think I got that from your language, page 63.
Mhm.
My question is, has anyone developed, I know you're showing examples, but has anyone used that bylaw here in this town?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Marie probably.
Do we have any cluster housing?
There is a provision in the
Right.
subdivision to have cluster housing. We have not had anybody, any group do that. We don't have any place in town that has a cluster housing and
But it isn't.
open space. We tried to do it by law along those lines, but it didn't pass.
You could do this through
But we do have
comprehensive
cluster housing.
permit though,
In our
so,
subdivision bylaws.
yeah.
There is a section that talks about, you know, where you can do cluster housing. And more open space.
And small lots.
Well, I
Smaller
thought it was for R2 or R4
Acreage
districts.
is the same, it's open space. The houses are clustered in one area, so they're closer than 4 acres and 2 acres. But the overall acreage equals what a 4 acre and a 2 acre lots would be
Yeah.
on that piece of property.
See, that wouldn't work with this project because it's much more clustered, yeah, yeah.
But you
This
can
is
do cluster
denser,
housing.
right?
Yes.
You can do cluster housing in our town on the correct amount of acreage.
Right, which is a lot, so, yeah. And the other thing is you can use a comprehensive permit, which gives you a lot of flexibility. And, you know, it's a great permitting tool because you have, you know, you can deal with all the waivers that you might otherwise not require.
Right, but isn't that comprehensive permit, is that the 40?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is a little complicated to me because on one hand, if you don't meet the affordable housing threshold, you can use that tool in order to loosen, as we would say, the sweater in the belt.
If you have an approved housing production plan.
Okay, so, but if you exceed that threshold, a developer would not be able to use that.
Exceed what threshold?
10%.
The 10%?
Mm-hmm.
You can use, there are a lot of towns where the developer is using the comprehensive permit as a permitting tool, but the town has to kind of join hands with the developer and agree on the basic terms and conditions. But if you have, 25% of the units are capital A, the other 75% can be little a, or in some even market. It's a good permitting tool to consider, but you can do it, you can go use it beyond the 10%, but the town has to sign off on it.
But that's what's called friendly.
Friendly 40B.
It's called friendly 40B.
Yeah.
And that's for communities like ours.
Right.
That has the 10% and wants to improve that because our housing production plan does say that we're going to try, there's no requirement, but we're going to use our best efforts to build 25 affordable housing units in the next 5 years. Now, since we haven't had any new housing in the affordable category since about 2006, we're coming on to 20 years ago was when Pine Woods was built. It doesn't seem unreasonable. Pine Woods is 30 units. It was built in the early 2000s. That it doesn't seem unreasonable that we should continue, even though, because we all know the need is great, and we would like to have housing that families can afford to come back and live here. We are, the line of children going to the schools here is going down with a pretty steep in decline. So
I
anyway,
think the document speaks to the fact that the death rate is higher than the birth rate here in Stockbridge.
that's not a very nice thing to think about.
Sorry.
Even if it's
Go on to the
true.
next, yeah, go on to the next one.
But I'd like to go back, because Jackie, did you're focused on that 13 that you found?
Yes,
All right,
yes.
I'm not sure you got an answer, but the answer is, if you take 25 that we're trying to do in 5 years, and you have what, 3 or 4 different ways to get to 25? The author of the document gave 13.
Well, there was some discussion about other members of the trust or whatever.
Just
I
right
think
down on the spot.
I had more.
Anyway, that 13 was take 25 and allocate the 25 among the different ways we could get there. And
But as I said, we don't have the concrete plans at this point.
Right.
To say definitely it'll be this property and this is how many.
That's right.
I also
Oh,
think,
I'll know that.
I would also just like to say, using common sense and understanding that we're all part of this community together, is I don't think anyone on this committee, I would imagine not, I'm not going to speak for the planning board or the other boards, but I don't think anyone on this committee wants us to throw up some kind of crazy amount of units and have neighbors upset and have people say it didn't work and have say it wasn't maintained. And like, that is not the situation anyone wants to go into. On a personal note, I would rather see us do a very small amount of really beautiful, thoughtful, sustainable units that people would be proud to have in their neighborhood, that will up the value of their homes, that you would want to live in, that your kids would want to live in. I mean, I think that makes a lot more sense to me than going in the opposite direction, because if we go in the opposite direction and it doesn't go well, it's going to be, no one's going to want to do anything ever again. And that's not good. You know, that's not going to be good for the town or any of us. So on a personal note, that's my opinion as we move forward. And that's what we're thinking about. You know, I think it's important we put ourselves in the shoes of the people who are going to be directly affected in this particular part of Stockbridge, if that is the project we move forward with, you know.
But
I agree with that.
really had some construction issues.
I agree.
And it wasn't really thought out that carefully.
And I think that's why, and I think,
We need to learn from that.
yes, I think having seen how that, it's important to really vet who is constructing this, to really figure out who is managing this, which is very difficult to find good property management that not only deals with the fiscal responsibility of the property, but also the actual maintenance of the property is really important. And hopefully we will learn from.
Well, now you have a
mistakes that were
housing
made.
trust too, that can
Right.
get much more kind of involved. There wasn't that.
Right, there wasn't,
back then.
yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
there wasn't really
Yeah.
anyone available to oversee that, and Construct that built it was just, didn't really have a staff, had never built anything before. And also, it has not managed it. If anybody's gone there, I know that when you talk about affordable housing in this town, you know, people say, oh my God, we can't have another Pinewoods. So we intend that anything that we do will be something that we will be very proud of, and hopefully you will be very proud of.
I just want to make a comment to your point. I'm sorry. Someone else wants to come, but on page 68, you talk about the early development review. And I was very encouraged by that. And it goes to your point. The language says the town could also require the developer to meet early in the development process with abutters and others in close proximity to the potential development sites, beginning a dialogue on how the project could best work for both the developer and community.
Smart developers do that.
Mhm.
And I was very encouraged by that language. To be honest with you, I thought instead of saying the town could, I thought it should say the town should.
Or would.
Like between, yeah,
We can
right.
still change that.
We can change it. We can change that.
Change that.
But part of the difficulties, as you know, associated with the donated property was many of us finding out about it in the newspaper
Right.
without having the benefit of knowing anything about
Right.
that proposal. It's mentioned that it was characterized as being adjacent, the first article, being adjacent to a cell phone tower and a solar farm, as opposed to single-family homeowners.
Right.
So,
Well, that's why I think that we have to
this gets to
continue to
your
be
point about.
transparent.
Clarence is on, you address that to Clarence.
Oh,
About the arts.
I didn't know you were on, but I was just taking a dig at your first article regarding the characterization of the beautiful Glendale Middle Road environment.
Are you in butter or near?
I am.
Well, I do think that this is why this is important, this is why, in my personal experience, when I lived in Boston, I lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood and, which was being speedily gentrified. And we had been there for quite a while and there were a lot of families and that community had a lot of meetings with developers and frankly laughed a lot of them right out of the room, which was amazing. But so those developers had to up their game. I mean, they really had to know what they were doing. They had to really take into consideration that community and what that community's needs were. And I thought, and that was an amazing thing to see happen. And I think it's really important to have that same transparency through any process we do, whether it's Glendale Middle Road project, whether it's another project. It's just because there has to be trust built. Not everyone's going to love everything. That's just the reality of life, but I think it's important that as long as people feel that they have a space to voice their thoughts and that they know what's happening, those two things have to be there for this to be successful.
I just want to say, Glendale Middle Road is not a predominantly Black community by any stretch. But it is a community of very solid, incredibly generous neighbors. We've lived on there at 7 Glendale Middle Road for 15 years, have never had that kind of experience with just tremendous support, people welcoming myself and Nikki, to the community. And we've been out to, talk about it. So transparency is really key. And I hope that we can continue to have it.
Yeah.
Once we get more information about this.
For sure.
I'm sure, I hope you will think that we have extended to the extent of what we know, everything to all of you and welcomed all of you to the process. The process has not started yet, although the engineers were out there. I was out there for 4 hours last week, tromping in the mud. And the wetlands are, if you want to go tromping yourself, the wetlands have been tagged. So you can see where they are.
Karen, you want to chime in on this?
This is a project that received a lot of attention and awards in West Concord, Massachusetts, called Riverwalk. This is another kind of pocket neighborhood, low-density clustered home ownership project. It included 13 units.
Why do you call it low density when it's 3 units per acre? How could that be low density?
Well, you have to think that 80% of America's population lives in cities. So you have to think about that. That's what that title has been adopted because for a lot of neighborhoods, this is low density.
Well, beyond that.
But this is an overall vernacular that's used in general. It's not necessarily for here.
But another consideration is that affordable housing, it's hard to make it work on large lots when the land is so expensive. And that's what, the situation is in Stockbridge. It's the land cost that's so high. And if you're going to have, some amount of affordable housing, you need a little density. So this is, I mean, we're going to show you some middle density units where there's, more.
Land is donated, you know.
Not all the all the land's going to be free or donated though. And even so, there's still, cost involved in, development and infrastructure and whatever. So, anyway, these are just examples. I mean, you might decide if you're going to do a project to do less density, if you could make the numbers all work. This just shows you a couple of projects that have attracted a lot of attention and been considered successful in their communities. And these are smaller houses. They range from 1,300 some odd square feet to 1,700 square feet. So they're relatively small. And it's the same kind of 3.5 units per acre. And the site plan is the next slide. And just once again shows the kind of a pocket neighborhood of houses around a green space.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you saying that entire cluster of houses, all of them are part of the project? Or
Yes.
just some of them?
All of them.
All of them. And what's around that?
A neighborhood.
But, so there was just a big empty lot in the middle?
That's a good question. I probably some of it was empty. They might have acquired some property and then, demolished it and then built those. It might have been one or two houses that were in bad shape and they bought it and then they redeveloped into this particular project. No, I don't. But it's a good question.
I had a question sort of just looking at
Sure.
that. I haven't heard so much about light and sound because that makes a really big difference when new housing, denser areas are plunked into the middle of wherever. And that makes, you could say, almost a bigger impact than the structures themselves. Traffic, late nights. I mean, that can really change an area depending, with all due respect, younger people.
I love coming here because when people say I'm young, I feel great. I'm 41, but thank you. But I'll take it. I'll take it.
But you know what I mean? I think that's something that really can make a big difference in the experience of the current people. Light pollution as well. People, you can't really tell people, don't turn on your lights, don't play music. We're not really that close to Norman Rockwell, but if they have a party, I mean, it's actually loud. It's not just sort of this faint hum. I mean, you could dance to the music, you know what I mean? So, I mean, these things have a real effect. And,
That's a good point.
and that's something, even if you screen, even if you can't see it, you would definitely have a different experience.
Nikki, it's true, you can hear music.
Oh, yeah, we thought it was.
I can hear Tanglewood from my
actually,
house,
a house that was sort of down by the railroad tracks. And people said, no, it's not those houses at all. It's when they have the, the galas, the fundraisers,
They had that exact issue in Richmond with Balderdash, actually. There was a lawsuit with that, yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a great point, and I do think that that's definitely something that needs to be in conversation with the developer in terms of where are the windows placed and are they, enough light for people, but then how do we make it as private as possible for people too? I mean, I think those are really good points. Good point. And I think traffic is a big one as well. Yeah.
Next. So these are just some examples of two-family homes, duplexes, that can often be, look like single-family houses, but offer 2 units without increasing any, significant density. The most affordable is the two-family owner-occupied house where they have, because there's that income from the rental, a lower income owner can actually afford the house. And we have some numbers in the housing plan that really demonstrates that. So just showed a couple examples. Next slide. Through this, and this is a project in Dennis on the Cape. This is middle density, goes up to 4.5 units per acre. What's interesting about this development is that it's rental and it's mixed use. They actually have included and they've kept the agricultural use on the property. There's a barn, kind of a working barn on the property. And so the community really responded well to the design. And then it was developed by a nonprofit, two nonprofits in partnership actually, and it is managed by a nonprofit and has been considered kind of a real amenity in the community. Next slide. This just shows some higher density, once again, back on the Cape, back on the vineyard, much higher number of units, 60 rental units at 7.7 units per acre. This was done in Oak Bluffs, but also includes some range in incomes that they go up to 100% of the AMI range. And it was developed again by a nonprofit Island Housing Trust and Affirmative Investments, which really specializes in financing. It includes amenities. It's not beyond what the density you might consider, but this is something that the community has really embraced on the vineyard. And another in the site plan.
What's the large building?
Oh, I think that's probably the solar, probably, I think it's probably a solar, the kind of
Solar
infrastructure,
array.
yeah.
Looks like it's on the roof of a building.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is, to tell you the truth. I know there is a community building, but I don't think that's it. I think it's another one of those structures.
That one, I think.
Yeah. And then next is just home conversions. This seems like something that could potentially work in Stockbridge, since you do have some of those cottages that might be amenable to breaking into smaller units. In Beverly, this is an example in Beverly, they actually have a bylaw that really kind of makes it user-friendly to do these conversions. And then next slide, mixed-use projects. This first property on the left is actually in Situate, and it includes the commercial building with accessory apartments or ADUs above. Their ADU bylaw allows them in commercial buildings in addition to residential buildings. And then the one on the right, this is not a very good picture. It actually is a very handsome building when you drive down Main Street in Falmouth. It has 58 apartments above a retail space. And then the last one, and this project got a lot of hoopla. It was really got a ton of awards, Manchester by the Sea. There were these dilapidated buildings in the town and they redeveloped them with 5,000 square feet of retail space and 39 units. And they were a mix of ownership and rentals, mix of incomes, 5 condos at 80% AMI, 17 rentals at or below 60% AMI, and 17 market units. And you can see, well, this is kind of right in town, but we're talking about 15 units per acre. And it was actually developed by the Manchester Housing Authority in concert with a private developer. That's kind of.
I'd just like to make a point. I'm from Cape Cod and I know the difference between living near the ocean and living here.
Yeah.
when you have an ocean surrounding you, you don't need as much space. You've got the whole ocean to look at and to go to. It's really a very different situation, like Provincetown. You have tiny little houses all clustered together, but you've got the bay out there, and that makes a huge difference in the way you think about land. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but don't the mountains have some kind of comparability?
Well, yes, but not, I don't think it's the same.
I would say it has a similarity in some respects because Karen and I have been talking about this, and I worked in Nantucket for like 6 years. It has some similarity in that you have towns in Berkshire County, I will say South County specifically, I would say, that have a lot of tourism, which is very similar to a lot of the Cape. Now, there's a lot of differences, as you know, there's a lot of differences.
Well, to me, the Cape is too crowded anyway, so.
Sure, but yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
but
It's crowded.
that's something that we have to think about and weigh with all of this, is that we live in a community that whether we like it or not, that is the main driver, I would say, economically.
Encourage it.
No, but if we don't maintain it and we don't keep it and we don't keep the cultural institution strong, what do we have?
We have a lovely town surrounded by mountains.
That will die because younger people will not want to be here. I'm sorry, that's the truth. And so we have to be thoughtful about, we live in such a beautiful place. To have these cultural institutions, to be a place people want to visit is like, we're blessed, I think, to have that. I mean, and you have to balance it with not letting it get so out of control that people can't live here. And I think that these are the nuances that we have been coming up against, that we all come up against, is how do we do this thoughtfully so that we are not in a catastrophe, but that we also maintain the fact that we want people to come visit here and we want people to stay and rent places and stay at the Red Lion and things like that. Because if we don't, it's not going to be good for this community to lose that aspect of what we are, unless someone brings in, a big employer comes in and provides jobs, because this is what we do,
I think they'd have to be very high paying jobs then. And I really, the only thing I keep on saying is you can grow industry, you can grow anything. You can't grow children. You've got to make it possible for parents with children to live in a space.
But don't you think now
Everybody,
more and more?
I'm not even from Stockbridge. We were brought here by people who were raised here. And they all talk about what this place was like when there was a lot of kiddos. Church Street, right across. One of my friends there say he grew up on the house that's now the Grange. And he said every Saturday was wild. You just get out your door and everybody on the block, you could drop in on anybody for water or go to the bathroom or something. All the kids would get out. And everybody keeps talking about that. And that ain't here.
But
And I
one
think
thing,
it's gonna
don't you
come back
feel,
unless there's, I may sacrifice a little bit of what we call density.
don't you feel though that more and more people are working from home? I mean, when we
Some are.
came here,
Some are.
we were working from home.
Some are.
Now we're retired, but
If I could respond to that for a second, we don't have broadband here. I mean, honestly, do you really think you can work from home with this limit? If you really want, I have friends in the IT business in New York who've gone through those houses in Housatonic and said we could fill those old mills, and said I could fill that with back office people in a heartbeat if you only had something like a decent internet out here. But you can't grow business or anything without these things anymore. You can't grow business, you can't grow families, but we can at least get the housing, get that part ready. I don't know if this community is ready for high-speed internet or anything that really could.
we have high-speed internet.
Yeah, we just,
For businesses?
yeah.
That's, okay. I'm a newcomer. I'm gonna step back, but I've known.
Well, I think what the point
No.
that's coming up is that housing cannot be divorced from economic opportunity. It just can't, I can live here because my husband does work remotely. And once a week, he drives to Boston to commute to the university that he works at. And he was doing that 5 days a week because he used to work at Harvard. So that was brutal and we could not continue that. And so he had to completely change, relearn a whole new thing and get a whole new job in a different industry because we wanted to be here. You know, if you don't provide economic opportunity for jobs that pay a reasonable amount of money, then you can't afford a house. I mean, that's just the reality. You can't afford rent. You know, that's just the reality. So I think these two things have to go hand in hand, which is why I think going forward, it's really important that as a town, we also are talking about economic development alongside affordable housing, big A, small a, whatever we want to call it. Because that, you know, all of they can't be bifurcated, really, you know. But I do think so, looking at some of the places on the Cape is not a bad idea because they do have similar challenges to what we go through in some neighborhoods.
Because of a lot of the seasonal population, the tourist industry.
Second homeowners.
Second homeowners,
Yeah. So I do agree the ocean is it feels different. But I do think that logistically they have some similarities that we could learn from, you know.
Yeah.
And challenges.
We're talking about infrastructure. There was a reference in the document about a sewer study. Has that been completed?
No.
I thought there was some reference to it being completed early this year. Do we know the status of it?
Is that part of the engineering study that's happening?
Yeah.
It's part of,
There is an engineering study and they're looking at water and sewer on your road and to see what what the capacities are. And of course, the usual kinds of things is you try to ask a question. All right, what kind of availability of infrastructure is there? And then they go around in circles. It's a little bit frustrating. We're trying to get through to it.
there's no larger sewer
I
study?
thought there was a larger one too.
There
In the water and sewer committee.
is, but what they want us to do is say, all right, are you building 20 units? Are you building
No, I'm
40
saying
units?
larger in the whole town.
The whole town.
Looking at the sewer and water.
Yeah, there is something, and I don't know what the status of that is.
Because I think there's a date in here that said, maybe January of this year.
You have a better memory than I do, that's for sure. Is it January? Yeah.
But, so we don't know what the status of that is yet, but it sort of backs into issues of density,
For sure.
economic development.
Right.
It's all really connected. I understand this is the housing and not a planning document, but, if we could find out. If someone could have just asked, I'll ask Michael. I'm assuming he has.
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
Let us know what you get for an answer.
Well, we'll follow.
Yeah, thank you.
Getting back to the job issue, I mean, the reality is in Berkshire County, Pittsfield has a population, more than 15 times ours, and they have also jobs. They have lots of jobs. General Dynamics is a high paid company. Biggest employer in the county, as far as I know, is Berkshire Medical.
The house.
We have a property, a house, a separate house where we live. It's not an AC system. We rented several times to doctors and nurses. They have high income. They live in Stockbridge. They stay 2 or 3 years. They move to somewhere. They eventually buy a house. Sometimes in Stockbridge if they can afford it. Or in Lennox or back in Pittsfield. But I mean, the reality, in my view, is jobs. There are lots of jobs. I don't think Stockbridge has to find jobs. That's not only is an issue for us. I think housing is a critical issue. It can't be divorced from employment, but Pittsfield is a city that has lots of employment. Sometimes they have high unemployment, sometimes they have low unemployment, but they have many, many good jobs and more companies are going there all the time.
I think I don't argue with that. I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think it also just, you're talking about something very specific, being the healthcare system. There's a lot of administrative jobs, but there's also, you have to go to school for some of that too, so you have to align with the thing that pays. And I think, something I always think about is I grew up outside of Albany. I grew up only about 35 miles from here. And, for me, I mean, they've seen a real resurgence over there and in Troy. And I think to myself, I wonder why a lot of the people who work for the state don't live here. Because we're only half an hour away. We have amazing schools. We have incredible childcare like free, programs I take my sons to that are amazing here. And I just think sometimes people don't know about it. I mean, I honestly think part of it is also just how do we get the word out in terms of PR about like what we are here and like how charming it is and how wonderful it is to live here. And look, you have this huge city right across the state line where you don't have to drive that far to get there, so I think that's part of it too, is just.
Well,
and that's all-
affordability is a big issue.
Yeah, but our taxes are actually
how much it's
lower
going to cost
here
to find someplace.
than in New
Yeah.
York,
That's a good
so.
point. I mean, also Lennox has attracted many good skill, good workers.
Right.
The GE Plastics, most of the executives live in Lennox. There's no reason they didn't, some live here as well. It's not,
Right.
so there's an opportunity. I mean, I think
Yeah.
my vision of Stockbridge is a small town,
Right.
and keep it small.
Yeah.
Keep it accessible in terms of nature and environment. And I think housing has to be part of that, but I think density is an issue, and I think it's something that we have to be very careful to protect. And if you look at the numbers, Great Barrington is twice as dense as we are. And I mean, if you come up on the gateway on 7 now, you're gonna come to the slide, I imagine, in a minute, but
Yeah.
you showed the new thing. To me, that's just horrible. I know it's on 7, you say, well, it's on a highway, that's all right, but it's not all right. It sends a very bad signal, I think, to people coming to the.
Are you talking about the affordable housing units?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty bad.
Yeah, and in addition, you're talking about the capital A or affordable housing, you may know, I know, our executive director has been coming to your meetings, Andrea, but our waiting list at Heaton Court, we have 53 units, there's over 1,000 people, some days it's 1,500.
Yeah.
They're not from Stockbridge.
Right.
I mean, they're not.
Right.
You know that.
Well, some are.
Precedents, veterans and Stockbridge residents have precedent. If your house burns down, you go to the top of the list. A disabled, over 60, income, all those requirements had to be screened. But I look at this list, there are people from Texas, there are people from Arkansas, people from Michigan. They've never even been here. They don't even know what it is. They want to move to Stockbridge only because the housing looks nice. They have a picture of Heaton Court, one of the nicest looking places in the Commonwealth in terms of affordable housing. It's a great,
True.
whoever developed it had genius. Unfortunately, Pine Woods is not the same, but it's the idea of this. So I see the pressure. So if we build affordable housing, who's coming?
Right.
I'm not sure about that at all.
Right, but I will also say that, I didn't grow up here. I grew up half an hour from here, but I didn't grow up here, but I love it here and I sing the praises of this town. So I think that sometimes my observation, with all due respect, is that sometimes people, get very, protective of, I grew up here and that's great. I think that's great. But we also have to welcome people who aren't from here so that we have some diversity of perspectives and we have, so I think it's more also just maintaining the charm, the character, and the respect for the people who have grown up here, who have been here and spent their lives here, as well as being welcoming to people who could really be an exciting part of the community.
It's probably worth mentioning that if you do use Chapter 40B permitting, at initial occupancy, at least up to 70% of units can be reserved for those who live or work in the community. So there's separate lotteries. So, that's a real kind of incentive for people to
be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
But that's capital A.
That's capital A.
That's capital A. And you have to have, isn't it 30% capital A? to use
25% at
25.
least, yeah.
Minimum of 25%. So the issue with,
What's 25%?
25% of the units have to be affordable to those at or below 80% of area median income.
Of what?
Or of what? The unit.
What percent in what?
Of a friendly 40B.
capital A.
Oh,
If you use friendly 40B for the development, which gives you more flexibility.
and that's in your document, right?
Oh, yeah. It's described. Or 20% of the units for those at or below 50% of area median income. That's the alternative.
But depending on what formula you pick,
Yeah.
alphabet soup. slide you go down, you're pointing out a very important issue, which is that if you use federal funds, it does need to have, it's open to everyone
Right.
in the country. And that's one of the things that the people I know in Great Barrington have been very frustrated with, because I think most of those developments are all capital A, or 80–90% are capital A.
Yeah.
So therefore, I don't know how the people who manage and do the lotteries and pick the people really do it. But it is a disadvantage if you're really trying to build, at least for people who live here.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. Also, working with HUD or the federal government, any issue. The regs are like this, with thousands of books, there's thousands of rules.
Yeah.
You need 10 lawyers to do everything, and the rules are just so stringent. It's very, very difficult to find a population and create a diversity that you might like, because they're like, oh no, you get 6%. It says here, that's Pittsfield. Well, that's your metropolitan area. You're in Pittsfield. Well, I don't think we're in Pittsfield. I really don't. Now, Vermont says their jobs there, but we're not part of Pittsfield. We're like a feeding community. It could be a community community. Commute to Pittsfield is what, 25 minutes, 30 minutes? It's easy for most of the country. People are driving an hour and a half. And it's a wonderful commuting town for people with a job elsewhere.
Yeah.
The policy seems to be a little shy with respect to design considerations. Keaton Court, very attractive.
Yeah.
Development. Is there a reason why the document is shy on design considerations?
Well, we don't have a project in particular. I think what we're doing is going through kind of various options to consider in all of that. But I think one of the next steps would be kind of design criteria. We're looking to get feedback on all of these.
I will say something very interesting about just being in Nantucket for that long. I don't know. I mean, if you've been there, they are not as worried about density for some reason. I mean, a third of the land on the island is protected. So, but then density wise, they're like, go to town, but they are extremely rigid on the aesthetic, extremely. And there's pros and cons to that as well. But it does maintain the characteristic of what that island is. And they are like, whether you're downtown or, sitting on your own plot in Sconset, you have to adhere to those rules. So it is something that once a project is identified to think about.
This is for you, Karen. Is this something we've left out? Or is it really part of?
Well,
this
it's
particular
often a
plan?
part of zoning. So, with any
Right,
particular
that's-
type of zoning, there are usually guidelines regarding massing
Right.
scale and
We don't
whatever.
have anything, we just have building height.
Right.
Well, I'm just saying that design guidelines are often taken up as part of zoning. And
Could be, but.
And I think these projects show, what they show is that, the community really was engaged with the developers and making sure that the design was really, I think in a lot of these projects, pretty much top notch. And that's going to be an important element of the community, is to really work with the developers and make sure that
It's aligned
it is.
with-
Yes.
But I think I could speak I feel as if I could speak for the trust. The work that we will do will have an extremely high criteria for the design and the aesthetic of the project and the landscaping. And that's something we can set, because it'll be land.
Yeah, I mean, if you do a request for proposals to select a developer, I mean, it's really the onus on the town to really establish the terms and conditions of the development and include design guidelines. And then when you get the proposals, you'll get the preliminary designs from the developers, and that will be an important indication of the selection process.
Another thing, I don't know if this is possible, but I think you should stipulate that all the developers be nonprofit.
Oh, no.
No,
Why not?
Because
Some developers are nonprofit, Why not have them be nonprofit for a project like that?
They still get a developer fee. Well, you know, you're the developer. You could step in, but there are a lot of.
You want Great Barrington?
What?
Would you like our town to look like Great Barrington?
No,
Guess who did those?
nonprofit? Well, I don't know if the design is so bad. I just think they're too big and too many of them.
There are numbers of for-profit developers who focus on affordable housing, who really know how to get this stuff done, who have great relationships with the state. So they'll help, get financing and have, once again, fabulous examples of good
Take a
work.
look at what Lennox is doing.
So why exclude them?
Yeah.
If that's the case,
Yeah.
why
Well,
exclude them?
it's gonna be less, you're gonna take the profit out of it, so it'll be cheaper.
Nonprofits still get a developer fee, overhead fee.
Oh, the
There's
same, the
still,
profit is the same. It just doesn't have the same name.
For 40Bs, there's a limit on profit, 20% limit on profit too, that's built in, whether it's a
I'll
developer.
study your document.
No, but it doesn't matter what the name is. The margins are there for both types of developers. Nikki.
Regarding this slide here.
Yeah.
I just wonder, with the mixed use, I just wonder, I'm noticing all the empty stores are in our town here lately especially. And I just wonder if you guys are able to work with the town and perhaps using some of that space, especially second floor space, as some kind of affordable housing or some kind of housing. I know Pam Sammer, who we probably know, the architect, had that garage across the street for just years and years and was not allowed to sell it to be developed. It would have been a perfect opportunity for a couple of units, but because of the laws in the town about housing. But actually, when you think of it, for people who might need affordable housing or who have the kids who could walk to the playground down the street, it would be very useful to have housing that was close. I mean, even our neighborhood, it might be great, all that, but it's not really so convenient for kids or adults or to actually get anywhere except by car. I just wonder if you have been working on that in conjunction, because that would be very helpful to have a kind of town. It could fit right in. It wouldn't look out of place.
Well, one of the things that did come up in the workshop was this issue of having the second floor of some of the commercial properties be eligible to have housing in them.
But why couldn't it just be regular housing, that the rent wouldn't be very high? I mean, it just could be regular rental.
Yeah,
rentals.
and
there
I
any-
think it's an issue that is actually mentioned in the document about that to suggest to the planning board that they kind of consider whether that is something, to.
Isn't that allowed? Isn't second floor housing allowed in the commercial zone?
Only in one zone area.
Really?
Yeah.
It's fairly restrictive.
I don't know what the law says, to tell you the truth.
I know in Lennox, above the buildings, just regular rentals.
Yeah.
Over some of the stores.
My husband and I actually looked at the bank building just because I'm interested. I like real estate and we were interested. And it is actually quite restrictive here in terms of, because there is a unit above that. And there was you could only use it for certain things, or you could, so I do think it's an interesting idea to how do we marry the housing opportunities with the economic opportunities for entrepreneurs to be in town and make that as vibrant as possible.
I also noticed, just to continue, a house down the street looks very derelict, right on Main Street going out toward Big Y. And I just wonder if anyone has taken rides around just to see what possibilities might be out there already, where maybe people are looking to have property taken off their hands.
We had talked about that early
There have
on.
been some discussions during our meetings of particular houses or whatever, and
But I don't think we've done that yet. So, but that's a good suggestion to do that.
It is, but I think it's in many, many towns, having the second floor be residential over commercial is very desirable. And second floor commercial is really a non-starter.
I know, you can't have housing on the base floor.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's true. You can't have housing on the base floor. That's what it was.
I think it's just in one district. And I'm trying to remember whether it's the RC district.
Well, we have one block of stores anyway.
We don't have too many stores and we're getting fewer and fewer, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think what you gotta worry about is that these buildings on Main Street, these prime lane, not being bought by local people. It's being bought by investors. You know what you wanna do with it? Make money.
What?
Of course.
They wanna make money. Why they're buying, they're all LLCs or whatever. They're not, there's not a person's name on it. They're buying these buildings.
Right.
That's the big problem.
You want to bring this to a close?
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments or suggestions? For our, we have then the next steps.
Yeah.
That,
Yep.
for what we're gonna do with this housing production.
Yep. So obviously, community feedback is really important and making appropriate changes to this. I think Jackie following up on the sewer system is important. So we'll do what we can to find out information about that for you. And
But this is for you too, Jackie. All of these slides are on the website.
Oh, great, thank you.
So they've all,
Sure.
Janet had them all posted. So if you want to download them, share them, yeah, spread them
people
around.
can reach out to us if they have
What's
questions.
your next step? What is the next step in this process?
Coming to you.
Yes, so we're going to,
nice.
we're going to be, meeting with the planning board and then the select board. And I believe that in talking with Kate Fletcher, that we may be on the agenda for the meeting on April 16th for the planning board. And then hopefully on April 18th, that Thursday, with the select board. Because we've already sent the draft housing production plan to the planning board members and to the select board members. And then we want to get their feedback on all of this. Then we'll probably be making some further changes based on all of the feedback, both today and from the two boards. We have to ask that the planning board and the select board have to really approve whatever is the final housing production plan. And then we would be submitting it to the state for approval. Did I leave anything out, Karen?
That was very good.
But you have no specific plan or place or piece of land in mind, right? This is the general plan that you're expecting the planning board to approve? I mean, is that?
That's correct.
General.
The
plan.
general.
You have no.
That's correct.
Place in mind.
That's correct.
But you mentioned that camp. Do you have any, when working on that, on Route 7?
Yeah, we
That
haven't,
seems like a good idea to me. What you need to do to follow up on that?
well, we have, did you want to?
On that campus she's talking about, they're gonna have to go to town meeting to get water and sewer.
This is, you mean the old.
The Levant.
Or have a.
Yeah.
That there has no room for water and sewer.
There's actually water and sewer right across the road in Lee.
Right, but they'll have to put a pumping station and everything else.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier on,
You have to talk to Lee, make sure that they're.
yeah.
It's a complex.
So all of these are possibilities, maybe, but there's an awful lot of work that would need to be done to see if they're really have a potential to come about.
Because the town might cut you right off.
Yeah, and
No way to get down to sewer.
so we don't have any specific projects. We do have this we do have the donated land,
Yeah.
which, as we've said, we don't know whether that is possible or not at this point.
And you would be going to the selectmen and the planning board is just the idea, the whole.
The general.
What you have right
The
there.
objective of trying to identify
Yeah.
and complete 25
What you need
capital A
from-
affordable
Yeah,
units.
what you need from the planning board and the selectmen is any major objections or any reasons you need to change anything, or that's,
Exactly,
so that's the next step.
exactly.
Exactly.
Well, the town also owns a unbuilt road right next to Heaton Court. So there was some discussion about expanding Heaton Court.
So that,
Yeah,
Yes.
we've talked on our board about it several
Yeah.
times. By the way, but if we had additional, I had actually some other comments I'd like to make, but not right now. Can I send some written?
Yeah, can we send?
Oh, sure. Great.
Yeah,
We'd be
absolutely.
happy.
Okay.
Or you can call any one of us. You can call anyone if you'd rather.
Randy, do you want it sent to the trust email or where would you like it?
Yeah,
If it's written, where would you like?
if it's written,
Email, that's fine, yeah, that's fine, okay, and it's, you have to address.
we have the-
It might address.
if we, our email, everyone's email on the trust is on the town.
Okay, yeah, I've seen it. yeah.
You've seen- so you can-
You're accepting some more comments on.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
This is a huge
Yeah.
document, as you know, by the way.
Yeah.
I was blown away by how much work you guys did. I mean, that's a lot of work.
It's,
everybody.
Lots to really.
It's
a
a-
lot.
It's very impressive. The
Spent a
data
whole
is-
lot of work.
Yeah, it's spent with, the day is gone, you know. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. I'd just like to conclude the meeting by saying thanks you have no idea the hours that, well, first of all, Karen, who has been an absolutely rock solid foundation for getting this work done. But both Janet and Michaela have spent a great deal of their
Well,
personal.
I'm gonna say Jan, let's say Jan. Jan. I have 2 small kids under 3, so I can only spend so much.
But Janet particularly has led this effort and we're very proud. Thank you very much for what you've done. Thank you for coming.
Guys.
yes, thank you very much.
The numbers may have been small, but they were mighty. So
Great, it was great.
But that's why we couldn't, because there aren't that many.
People.
That's
right.
That's right. So we really got
Yes.
to talk. So please feel free to contact any of us
Okay, thank you.
if you,
Thank you, everyone on Zoom.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Going
you.
to-
Thank you all.
We're going to close now.